Yes, so today I facilitate this career talk. And first of all, we will introduce myself or ourselves. So firstly, me, I'm a Ryoichi Watanabe at Kyoto University and graduate student, and studying the development of consciousness. So next, who? Yota?
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Yota Kawashima. I'm research assistant at ATL and Monash University under the supervision of Professor Naots. And I'm working on the test of IIT and also like other computational work. And next, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Aniko Kustar. I'm from Monash University. I'm a PhD student, and I work on depersonalization, derealization, and mind wandering, and processes like that.
Okay, so we'll discuss about the paper. Today we read the paper, What Might Interoceptive Inference Reveal about Consciousness? In Review of Philosophy and Psychology 2021 by Nia Nikolova and Peter Stepwater, Carl Jeffreyston, and Michael Allen. And do you know the authors?
Of course, I know one author, like Carl Jeffreyston, who's like first working on like I think fMRI study, like developed SPM. Then after that, started to like develop like this predictive coding framework, famously known as free energy principle. Yeah, that's all I know about him. Do you know any other authors?
Yeah, so I also know Mika Allen, or kind of know. I follow him on Twitter, and I know that he has been working on the interoception, and he has had been working like on very interesting different approaches on monitoring the heart rates, and yeah, just in general, I think he's a pretty big name in interoception. And I also know that he has a very cute puppy that he often posts on Twitter. So anyone is interested in puppy content, I can recommend to follow him.
I see.
I see.
Okay, thank you. Me too. I know the Carl Jeffreyston. Yes. So next we introduce the summarize. And in this study, the authors focused and introduced the theories of consciousness, like higher order theory and global neural work theory, and the IIT, and active inference of free energy principle, and also the relationship between the theories and predictive inference and interoceptive sensory. So, and next they describe the emerging concept of interoceptive inference, and finally they explore the potential of interoceptive inference to integrate with each of the theories. So the authors tried to the theories like the predictive HOT or predictive GNW and inference of IIT, and like this. But it's a process of this study? And do you want to add something?
Yeah, so as Ryoichi said, I think the authors try to put the predictive processing into consciousness studies, and then in this paper they specifically talking about how the predictive processes can be related to the other theories of consciousness, hot theory, global New York space theory, and integrated information theory, and then what we can do from here, I mean, in terms of empirical study and also computational study. So there are no experiments in the study. This is just as you said, like a review or kind of proposal for further study, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to mention that they are specifically focusing on interoception as a key component, or actually they kind of discuss different versions of these theories of consciousness connected with predictive processing. And so they provide alternatives in which in one you have the interoceptive inference as a very crucial aspect, and or in other versions and other alternative theories you have interoception as just one of the other sensory or kind of external information processes that then are integrated. And I think this is actually a key aspect of the paper to kind of discuss whether interoception can fit it into these theories, and how would that be? Yeah, I think that was definitely a very interesting contribution and very thought-provoking.
Yes, okay, thank you. And first of all, I explained the keyword. Predictive coding or predictive inference means three components, and one is a prediction, and secondly, a prediction error, and third, the precision of each of these signals. So prediction error is corrected and make the new beliefs like something or internal model. And also the interception or interoceptive means that the internal sensation, right? Or internal sensation or perception or something metacognition of the basal cycle or organ something. Yeah, there was additional explanation. Or do you want to add something or what to discuss?
Yeah, I think these keywords were just enough to go beyond further for discussion. So maybe we can just start discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, this was a very difficult read. There's a lot of theories explained and a lot of concepts mentioned and different terms introduced, and so it was definitely, or at least for me, a more challenging read. On the other hand, I think this paper is very nice for anyone who is interested in consciousness and active inference and interoception, because I think the authors do a great job in providing references for the seminal work in these topics. So yeah, overall, I had this impression that I want to read or I have to read all the papers they cite, because most of them should be, or I'm sure many of them would be very useful in like fully understanding these concepts and fully appreciating the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, in terms of the number of pages, I think this one is the like longest one so far, and roughly like 30 pages, including citations. And also, as Aniko mentions, like there were like many concepts explained in this paper. So first, of course, the predictive coding or predictive processing, and also to fit that process into consciousness study, they raises 3 theories of consciousness, and so higher order theory, global neural theory, and also integrated information theory. So I think in order to fully understand this paper, first we need to understand these theories first in detail. And then after that, we can, like, I think, see a clear link between these theories and the predictive processing. So it's, you know, quite intense, I think, just too much. Yeah.
Yes. So and for my impression, that normally the conscious theories have explained the like the external perception of the conscious perception of the external, like the vision or audio or something tactile normally, but in this study they focused on the interoceptive conscious and the relationship between them and the relationship between the interception and the theories. It is so interesting for me. And normally the free energy principle or active inference is focused on the interception and self-consciousness. But the other theories did often, as far as I know, did often focus the interception or like self-consciousness. Is it clear or?
Like I have like one question. Like I think basically these like free energy principle on other like predictive coding stuff were more related not to our consciousness, but rather like just like principle or the computation happening in the brain. So in that sense, like this paper like tried to fit these concepts into consciousness study research. And I think that's the like a point, the biggest point of this paper, I think. So, so like, is it like correct, or like, is there like, yeah, I understand. I know that in some like maybe another paper, like the people like talk about the relationship between predictive coding or things like that with consciousness, of course, as cited in this paper. But I think this paper kind of like correct these kind of all concepts into one paper, and then try to overview of this like a research the framework, I think. So that is also like makes us to understand, or that makes it's very like difficult to understand this paper because it requires a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, I think yeah, exactly, like yeah, it definitely requires a lot of like knowledge of these concepts, and also so something I was kind of missing from this paper, but I also understand that it's already a long and complex paper and they don't have the chance to, you know, include everything. But I would have benefited from more examples and also more experiments or explanations of previous experimental results. So, for example, when they discuss the different theories, I think in many cases it would be important to point out that, okay, what kind of experimental result would be better explained by the predictive version of, for example, the higher order thought theory or the global workspace, the global neural workspace theory. And also, that is a very difficult thing to ask for, but it would be very interesting to read about examples or proposals how to falsify or kind of do this kind of adversarial collaboration, whether this cognitive or this consciousness theory actually requires predictions and or not. Somehow, like what kind of experiments could we do to test these? And also, how do these theories reflect on patient data, blind sight, or all these very classical studies and concepts of consciousness research?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, yeah, I think like this paper like kind of explain like 3 theories of consciousness, and then what the predictive processing add on top of these, and how they relate with each other. Yeah, how they relate with each other. But as Aniko mentioned, that by adding like predictive coding concept, what we can like say or how we can compare theories, that part is, I think, missing in this paper. That makes like, yeah, I understand like it's very difficult, and if they came up these ideas, then I think they just do that kind of experiment to test these theories, and that is like a just a one research project and like worth publishing to a journal. So that's a very like a difficult, I understand, but at the same time, without any like example, it's a bit difficult to see the the difference between the theories, and also why this like predictive coding concept is important. That kind of stuff is, I think, a bit difficult to understand without like any clear examples.
Yeah, I see. And also, was there the explanation of the explanation why the interception is important? Did you see the detail?
I think yes. At some point they explained why they think the predictive processing is important or interoceptive inference is important. But I think, at least for me, it was not clear. Somewhere.
Yeah, so I think what they are arguing is that in most cases, any theory, both the consciousness and also the active inference theory, is kind of building on the fact that there is this self-organizing agent, and it needs a way to understand how it relates to the environment. And so, for example, in our case, or what they bring up, we have the brain where consciousness lives, and then around it there's the body, and it needs the interoception, like the consciousness or the brain kind of needs a way to interact with the body because that's its closest environment, so to say. I think that was a very interesting like way of thinking about this, or yeah, description. And yeah, so I was actually thinking about this, and I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think of do you think any theory of consciousness should have a clear relationship between the body and the brain, or is that not necessary? What do you think?
So, like, when you say body, like, do you mean that the body should consist of like sensors that can like collect information from external world, and also some like devices for interacting with the environment, or just some like physical substrate? Which do you mean? Like,
so I guess the former, but I mean it kind of, yeah, I mean obviously we could model entities that doesn't have the physical substrate. Yeah, but then I think in our day-to-day life, or yeah, it's hard to imagine when the two are not the same. But yeah, I would definitely say the former one. So some way to interact with the environment. And I know this is I guess an important aspect, and the authors also mentioned that active inference is the theory, like in the center of the theory relies the fact that there's this unit that want to survive in the environment.
Yes. So for my opinion, that also the author's insight cited the Sean Gallagher 2000, and Gallagher said the minimal self and the relationship between the self and the body or something. And so I think that why the interception is important and why predictive coding is important. It means for the self-consciousness or sense of agency or something, it is important to integrate the interoceptive information and something or body images, and in the mind the prediction error is big, means this is not my moving, or this is not my sensation, but prediction error is small. It means this sense is mine, or this moving is mine also. So I think that in this study or in the field, the interception and the predictive coding and the brain and body is important for conscious study, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, but at the same time, like you can like kind of you can like often see a kind of situation in like scientific like fiction movie or something, where like you remove the brain and then put it into like a water and then just leave it as it is, and then the question is whether like the brain itself has an like consciousness or not, without any like input or like sensory input or some devices to interact the external world. And well, like if you think about the case of dream, where you do not have any like sensory like information from the external world, and also you do well, like while you're dreaming, your body is like moving, but it does not necessarily like match with the action happening in the dream. So maybe in that sense, we do not need the body for like conscious experiences. Well,
I mean, yeah, but then we are completely missing out on the fact that you had like your whole life to develop your brain.
Yeah.
And dreams and you know, like, of course, if it would be possible to take out the brain of a living human being and kind of preserve it, I could believe that for some time maybe it could have some conscious experience, but I think if you just kind of grow a brain without any input, I mean, obviously, yeah, it wouldn't even form the way, like, I mean, I can't even imagine, because, you know, even in so when an embryo is growing, then still it processes information because it's in the womb, and it kind of maybe hears things and like floats around, and like still there is some information from its outside. So I mean, I don't think it's even possible, or at least I can't imagine how you could have a fully formed brain developed in a jar without any external input. Because then what would be the trigger to you know, for the synapses to change?
Yeah.
So now I remember that there is like a study of like organoid, if I remember correctly, where you can kind of grow like a brain or just other like a body organ in the like a petri dish or somewhere. I'm asking whether that kind of brain has consciousness or not. And I agree with you that like I like assume that, or in the case of dream, I assume that I did not consider like the developmental process of the brain like during the life, but yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I agree that without any like input and output, the brain do not have any clue how to change their connectivities inside the brain. So yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah.
I agree also, because I'm a developmental science psychologist. So yes, I consider the development of brain needs the experience and right more the body, included body experiment, and the sensory motor contingency is also important for consciousness. And I think the content of consciousness is more important. Sorry, content of consciousness needs the experience before the full brain, because or some according to the brain plasticity or something, the study of the cat site. Do you know? So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't explain fluently in English, but in the baby cat, and only they can see the horizontal line only, not vertical line. And after of the development, and they cannot see the vertical line, but they can only see the horizontal line or something. It is, I think it's related to this conversation or this theme. Or
yeah, and so I think it's also like one of the interesting things with interoception, that it kind of like, it is one of the first thing that's there during development. So even if someone is blind and deaf, still they will have interoception and you know, sensation, or like tactile sensations. But yeah, I think in that case, like interoception may be one of the first kind of source of information, but I'm not quite sure how embryo development is working, and but yeah, it would be actually interesting to see when interoceptive cues become available to the brain. I would assume pretty early.
Yeah, I like completely agree with you. But I think it's also like important to mention that like we like automatically assume that like the consciousness is rich as we experience. So if you like consider much poorer conscious experience, right? Just like two perception or like phosphene kind of just an like vague kind of experience without like any like strong like emotions or just strong vivid perception, maybe like only like, yeah, that kind of, if you consider that kind of consciousness, maybe, yeah, input and output may not be necessary. But yeah, I don't think whether, or I'm not sure whether it's like a meaningful, or I mean, I do personally do not like interesting in that kind of consciousness, even if it exists. So yeah, I agree that for richer conscious experience, we definitely need input and output. That, yeah, I agree with you.
That kind of, sorry, just that kind of raises an interesting point that I don't remember where, but I recall reading this, that the more complex sensory input an agent have, the more complex the conscious experience can be. And yeah, in this regard, maybe interoception is an important aspect because it's an additional way of adding to the richness of consciousness. So yeah, I agree that it seems like an important building rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually I have one thing to like, yeah, I have one thing to discuss, or I have kind of a question. So I kind of understand that like that there is a predictive processing, like from the bottom up versus top down kind of like distinction. But yeah, it's intuitive that to consider the like bottom up processes, but top down, if we think about the top down processes, my question is like that, where does it start? Like, is there any like a particular brain region where is the starting point of that? And also like why that kind of area, or why that happened in that area? So whether the connectivity is important, or what is the important, or what makes it the starting point of the top-down processing? And that's one kind of question. And in relation to that, and in the like a higher order theory version, the predictive processing, in the relation between the predictive processing and higher order theories, they mentions that maybe the predictive processing framework can kind of unify recurrent the first order theory into this higher order like theory framework. But if that's the case, then where is the important, or which layers of top-down process is important for like this consciousness? Like while I was reading this the relation between hot and predictive processing, I assumed that the most inner layer or the most higher layer is the one which is important for conscious experiences. But after that, they introduced that there is a first order theory, and then this kind of the prediction error kind of stuff can, or the prediction to somehow lower that lower order information is important for consciousness. And then after that, okay, then there is many layers within brains, and if they assume that all this kind of prediction layers has consciousness, do they mean that there are many so-called consciousness all over the brain, or how can we I mean, I subjectively feel like my consciousness is only one. So how do they deal with this or answer this question? So yeah, briefly, again, if I summarize my question, where is the the core of consciousness in this predictive processing framework, and where is it? That's kind of my question. Or what do you think about this? Or did you have any did you have the same question while I have this question clearly while I was reading this, so I wonder don't you have the same question, or do you agree?
No, I definitely had the same question. I think with predictive processing, I think it is a very difficult question, and I don't have the knowledge of the literature to answer it. But I think it's hard for me to understand. So I see that they propose different hierarchical levels, and then in all hierarchical levels there are these prediction error and expectations processes, and with certain precisions, and then at some point I think they propose that you have the precision as a source of conscious experience, or a precision, the expected precision of the sensory input. But then again, I think, it is not very well clarified whether is it a brain region, or is it a network of regions, or is it all around? Or and I think this is something I have a question, and maybe I'm just not knowledgeable, but so what is the exact neural process of the prediction error? At what level? I would like to see the prediction error simulated in a or maybe somehow shown in a segment of the cortex. And I don't know of any of such demonstrations. Yeah, I don't know.
So as far as I know, I think the for the Ramez recurrent processing is also shows the feedback and feed forward and feedback loop is also the prediction maintenance. So I think there are a lot of prediction error process, but I also where it's the main for the consciousness. I don't know, but I think one is a hint that Anurses and Freestone wrote the paper about the predictive coding of the like this paper's thema, interception, and predictive coding paper. So we can read it, and also I think according to the global neural workspace theory, or the prediction errors ERP, like the N400 or P300 is to say it says that there are shows the prediction error. So one hypothesis is that association areas prediction error is important, or something in insurance prediction error is important, I think, for consciousness or something.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I have heard about or I know of the ideas around event-related potential ERPs like P300, mismatch negativity as a marker of expectation violations. Yeah, I am still like unsure on a very basic anatomical and functional level how is it working, like how.
Yes,
like, this is
I
the
see.
role of scientists to figure out.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I also like have a similar question. What's the the temporal property or the scale of this prediction error? Like if is it like a it's again depend on the actual physical mechanism of prediction or predictive coding or predictive processing. But if we think about I don't know, the moderation or the modification of connectivity is kind of related to reconnecting of neurons, then I wonder whether it's that first enough to have that kind of modification of model, or I just curious about again the physical mechanism of this predictive processes, as Nico says, and then if we know that and then we have some a temporal scale for that, maybe we can have a clear a interpretation of this or the link between the predictive coding and consciousness experiences. And if the timescale of predictive processes are matched up with the timescale of a consciousness or conscious perception, then maybe we can say that the predictive processes is kind of important for consciousness, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Definitely this temporal aspect of predictive coding. I don't recall reading about it, and that would be very interesting. A good study to suggest.
Okay, I think we have already talked about roughly 1 hour, maybe, and I'm not sure whether you have any other questions.
So I have one question. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
How to integrate the predictive coding and the IAT? Sorry, I cannot understand in this paper.
Okay, so I think I can, or to be honest, first of all, I could not read the whole part of the explanation. But first, they clearly says that like it's very difficult to fit the predictive processing into IT framework because the starting point is completely different, meaning that IT starts from like a phenomenology. On the other hand, predictive processing assume the like external world and also some the consciousness agents. So that's the difference. That's a clear difference. So they says that like it's very difficult to like fit the predictive processing into IT framework. But at the same time, they like suggest some kind of relations, for examples, but the possible interpretation from IT analysis. And for example, say if we do some IT analysis and then find some areas which gives the higher integrated information, then that might correspond to the area playing important role for the prediction or the higher layer prediction area. That's kind of the one possible like prediction from predictive processing framework. Yeah, I think they also mentions other like a possible like interpretations of IT like results in terms of predictive processing framework. But yeah, basically they do not like, yeah, I don't think like they did like, I don't know, like,
yeah.
Do you want to add something to Aniko? Do you want to like add anything?
Yes, I think in the later section of the discussion, they kind of bring up a couple of ideas how to integrate, and then one of the ideas is the fact that maybe self is like the selfhood is its own complex, and it's like it might be highly important. And yeah, I think that must be an interesting question. And I was thinking, because I'm interested in depersonalization and derealization phenomena, so I was wondering whether is this somehow relevant for my interests, because in depersonalization you have so people experiencing it have a clear experience of the loss of self, or the sense of self is no longer how it is usually, and in that way kind of so this concept of self seems to be in one way vulnerable, or it is possible to kind of lose it. But then again, I think we can always question whether is that the same self as IIT would call it self-concept or not, because then again people notice that they don't have a experience of the self, but then they should have something experiencing that. It's very difficult, and I think so specifically the case of depersonalization makes it a bit like it breaks your brain. It's like, so what is the self? Is it the experience or the model, or even like on what level? And again, I think we are getting back to the same thing. Like we would need clinical examples, experiments showing these corner cases, or at least for me, I need some corner cases to understand the implications of these studies and the interactions between them.
I see. Yeah. I see. Like, if I remember correctly, Hiroichi mentioned about the self, the relation between self and the prediction error. So maybe one possible like interpretation or expectation from this predictive processing on depersonalization stuff is that these people have like a larger prediction error compared to normal or healthy subject. But again, like we are not sure whether like the self is model or self is kind of the representation or self is like an information structure happening in the brain. That's like a big question. Yeah.
So interesting.
Self. I think in terms of the self, higher order theory is one that clearly says that the self is kind of important for consciousness. But other than that, like if I understand correctly, IIT it kind of says that like intrinsicness is kind of maybe related to self in a sense. But like global neural space, do they mention anything about self or?
I think they don't mainly focus the self. Yeah.
Because like if I or the global neural space or the proponent of global neural space says that this is the theory about access consciousness, but we still have like access to self. Like let's say a good example can be a metacognition or something. So if that's the case, then the self should be explained in global neural space like framework. But I don't think that in this paper, they did not mention about anything about self in global neural space theory, I guess.
Yeah, no, normally they don't refer, and the metacognition, access consciousness, and self access consciousness, right? So I think the level, there's no sorry, this is my opinion. They normally they saw or normally saw that they are the same level of the access conscious, namely access consciousness, the self access consciousness or metacognitive access consciousness or perceptual access consciousness, or like so. So one consciousness is on the global workspace. Global workspace. So this is my understanding.
I see. So in a sense, the global workspace is the kind of self, or I don't know if this interpretation is correct or not, but like there's only like one global workspace. That means like we have only like one self in the brain. But if we have like more than like one global workspace, let's say like 2, 3 like workspace, then it does not make sense to have like a self, because we have like, if there like more than one global workspace, then there will be more than one self, which does not make sense at all. Yeah, I don't know.
And normally one global workspace, and the other papers, Duan and Quida and Law write the, how to say, I think Science and 2016 paper. So AI consciousness and like something, and they showed the 3 consciousness level C2 and C0, C1 and C2. And I think C1 is normally the first order consciousness or something, perceptual consciousness or something. And C2 means I think that the metacognition was self-consciousness. So Duran or global workspace theory have the self-consciousness, I don't know, but normally they refer to the perceptual awareness, perceptual consciousness of the access consciousness. Yeah, 2020 or something.
I see.
Yeah, I think maybe as a concluding remark, I would be definitely interested in seeing these theories tested in experiments, and I think there's a lot of way to integrate all these theories, and I think it's actually very nice for a scientist to kind of try to find a way to integrate ideas that may not be kind of corresponding to each other. So yeah, I appreciate this effort. I think it's very nice.
I see.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I have asked a lot of questions, and in a sense, it sounds like a criticism, but this paper itself was like very interesting, and then I think it helps me to understand deeper about this predictive processing, and also give me a kind of big picture of this like consciousness theories.
Yeah.
Yes, good discussion.
Okay, maybe we can wrap up here. Do you want to say something, Ryoichi, as a conclusion? Nothing?
Nothing.
Okay, then we can just stop recording at this. Yeah. Oh, yeah.